Hello, everybody. How we doing?
Hi,
Hi.
Rabbi.
Are you driving?
I'm not, but
Oh,
I am using my mobile office.
you're always in some exotic location.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
I'm
I
in a
moved.
place where yesterday was 80 degrees and today it's snowing. That's how exotic of a location it is.
Oh my, where were you in 80 degrees?
Here.
Here,
Yeah.
yesterday was 80 degrees and today
Yes.
it is snowing.
Yeah.
And it
My
is freezing.
goodness.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a wacky, wacky weather.
That's really wacky.
Yeah, it's a little bit drunk, the weather right now. Yeah.
But
The
they
portal
missed
is open.
Purim.
Craziness, craziness. I'll unblur for a moment just so everybody can see those that are not. Well, most of you are experiencing the same thing we are over here. I mean, that I am, but for those that are in a different part of the world, let's, check out what's going on outside.
Yes.
Yesterday was 80 degrees.
What did your kids do in 80 degrees? Did they run around outside?
They enjoyed life, is what they did.
Unbelievable.
And now they're like trying to figure out what exactly is happening.
Oh my
But
goodness.
it is what it is. Okay.
That's a good button, the blur the background. How do you do that?
Yes. Yeah. It's in the options the video options.
Okay.
Jerry, I'm forgetting what you look like, Jerry.
I know, I promise next week. I promised myself this week, but I promise next week.
All right. Okay, we're gonna jump in. Although I do this time, I will actually have to keep to a little bit of a shorter session, because a lot of Pesach shopping to do, and I have a limited time to do it, and the Chami's counted on it. So, uh, if you want to help with my Shalom bias, you will help me get out earlier. Today.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
But let's jump into learning today. Parshas Vayakhel-Pekudei. It's a double Torah portion with very little to talk about, seeming.
I don't
Why?
think so.
Because everything that we're going to speak about, we spoke about. Rashi almost takes a vacation this parsha. These two parshas, as he actually prefaces it in one of the first entries he has at the beginning of the parsha of Vayakhel. He says, "All this I already explained in Parshas Truma Tetzaveh. Good night." For the most part, is how he phrases it. But he says all the details of this. He just makes sure that you understand that the reason that he's not commenting on all these things is that he had just done so. So that if you want to, you can go back to Parshas Truma Tetzava and the verses. It's actually interesting. On the one hand, for a Bal Koreh, these two Torah portions are very easy, but then also, oh, I didn't even get the recording started. Oh, I did. But on the other hand, very difficult. Why? Because they're nearly
The
exactly the
little ones.
same
Right.
as Parshat Teruma Tetzaveh,
Exactly.
but just enough variations to throw you off.
Exactly.
So, like the verse starts the same, and then all of a sudden there's a change of word here, a change of drop there. So, on the one hand, very easy, but very hard. So, what is there, in fact, to talk about? Now, we've spoken in the past about the general point that needs to be made, which is why with the Torah that is so careful about not wasting an extra letter, waste seemingly, and of course it's not wasting, but the argument is that seemingly it's wasted two entire Torah portions. And again, it is remarkable because this Torah portion itself uh, is paradoxical in the fact that we learn all the melachot of Shabbat, all those things that are permitted and prohibited on Shabbos, which is a vast section of Jewish law, Hilchot Shabbat, and all the details is a vast part of Jewish law. In fact, somebody who has studied it and observes it so much that becomes the term synonymous with orthodoxy in kind of colloquial language. We say somebody who is Orthodox. How do you say that in kind of in colloquial language in the religious world? You call them a
from
Shabbos.
no, Shomer Shabbos.
yeah.
And is a Shomer Shabbos somebody who just keeps Shabbos? No, Shomer Shabbos is the way you refer to somebody who's generally Orthodox. But Shabbos is so fundamental, so many laws and so many details, et cetera, et cetera. Now, how many verses does Torah use to articulate the specifics of what of the observance of Shabbos? Like all the 39 general prohibitions, which break out into thousands and thousands of details, from not knitting and not lighting a fire to cooking and baking and cutting and building and squeezing and threshing and winnowing and all these things. How many verses are dedicated in the Torah to this?
One.
The answer is half of a verse, half of one verse. And the verse says, "You shall build the Mishkan and rest on Shabbos." And so we say that what do we know that you're resting from on Shabbos? You're resting from on Shabbos that which you were building in the Mishkan. So we articulated 39 general enterprises that you engage in to build the Mishkan. As we said, the cutting, the building, the winnowing, the threshing, etc., all these things. And we said that those are that which you abstained from. So the Torah is so brief and so concise that this vast body of law that is Shabbos, the Torah makes do with giving you a half a verse and then relies on the fact that you will explicate this through the sages over the course of history. And yet, all the details of building the Mishkan, which was by definition a building that was obsolete as soon as they left Egypt, as soon as they entered into the land, and they built then variations on it, etc., etc. Okay, so let's say it's not totally obsolete, but definitely now we are sitting there for the majority of history. We have not had a temple or either the Mishkan or the Mikdash, etc. And yet the Torah doesn't devote one Torah portion, two Torah portions in giving it all the details. It then devotes another full 2 Torah portions into telling us that the Jewish people did everything as commanded, and here's what they did, and then goes through it all again. When it could have just said that one verse, and the Jewish people did exactly as they were commanded, which is, by the way, how the Torah always, when it articulates a particular command from God to Moshe, and then the Torah wants to report to us that the Jewish people did, in fact, do what God commanded, it just says that. And the Jewish people did, and the Jewish people did everything that God commanded Moshe, finished. And we don't say, you know what they did? They did this and this and this, and this and this and this, and this and this, because we already said it in the command portion of this story. And yet here, they repeat all the details again. So after laying out the whole argument in the question, I'm going to say that we're not going to discuss that because we've done it in the past. And different than this Torah portion, we're not going to repeat to that which we've already discussed. We've discussed this. If you want the answer and you weren't here in the past when we've given the various answers that there are to give on that and the beautiful lessons in that, you can pull me aside at a different time or go back in time and join this class a couple of years ago. Okay, but let's talk about something else interesting in this parsha, because there is a few updates to that which was told in Teruma and Tetzaveh. In Teruma and Tetzaveh, we were introduced in the command part of it that Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur, right, was the chief architect. First of all, what do we know about Bezalel in his lineage? From which tribe is he?
One's Benjamin and the other is Dan.
Close, not Benjamin. Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur Lamatei Yehuda.
And Dan, yeah.
And Aliyah and his deputy architect, his deputy chief architect, is Ahaliyav ben Chelon from Lamatei Dan, as Paula said, very good. And the Torah makes a point of stating that because we're trying to show that there is no elitism in Judaism. In many ways you might assume that the tribe of Judah is an elite tribe, tribe of Cohen and Olivia, and the last of the tribes was the tribe of Dan. But here it was that the two partners in building the Mishkan was one from the tribe of Yehuda and one from the tribe of Dan, across the spectrum, right? And that is, every single person has what to contribute, and a caste system in that regard of only those that were born into a certain hereditary elite or genealogical elite get to be part of it. The answer is no. Any v'chol ish chacham leiv, v'chol ish or v'chol ish isha asher nadva libam, any single man or woman that wanted to contribute, that had the heart to contribute, did. So the Torah introduces us not only to Bezalel and Ahaliav in a general sense, but then we also have a few interesting tidbits that tell us about them and about the process as it played out. One of them, interestingly, the Torah makes reference to the fact, and the Mishkan was built exactly as Bezalel deemed, which is a little bit strange, because who was commanded by God?
Moshe.
Who was commanded by Moshe? But
Moshe didn't know the answer to some questions, so...
So that's where we're heading with this.
Oh, okay.
So Moshe is the one who was commanded by Hashem. Bezalel is supposed to be seemingly the one who executes. So it could be the Mishkan was built exactly as Bezalel executed, or exactly as Bezalel did. But the expression is exactly as Bezalel deemed. Like he had some decision making in this. Like wait a minute, I thought the one who's making decisions is Hashem, and if not Hashem, then Moshe. Well, Bezalel, you get the blueprints and go build it. But where do you have some executive authority in this? And this, that as it seems to be implied in the text. Now, here is where it gets interesting, because the Talmud says that there was a debate between Bezalel and Moshe about the building of the Mishkan. And Moshe had one particular approach. Bezalel had a different approach, and they argued. What was the debate? The debate is what gets built first. Moshe was commanded by God. The first thing God commanded Moshe, as we'll go back to Parshat Truma and Tetzaveh. What was the first thing that Moshe was commanded to build? He was commanded to build the Aron HaKodesh, the holiest. That the very thing. If you open Parshat Truma, V'yichuli Truma, then it says here all the materials you should collect, and now you should start building. The first thing it says you should build is the Holy Ark, right? Ultimately, makes a lot of sense. That's the main and the primary vessel, as being the primary. What does the word primary mean? First. So the primary vessels get spoken about first, and then all the rest of them, to the point where there becomes a point of discussion whether we can truly read into the fact that, for example, one of the vessels is spoken about at the very end, and does that mean it's the least of the vessels? Because the implication, seemingly, if it comes last in the discussion, it means that it's the least of the vessels. And after it discusses the vessels, it then discusses the walls and the structure, etc. So Moshe, the disciple of God, comes to Bezalel and says, okay, you're going to build the Aron HaKodesh first, then you're going to build the rest of the vessels exactly as God said it, in the order that God said. Comes Bezalel and says, nah, I disagree with you. Build the structure first. We're going to build the structure first. In the execution of God's mandate, we're going to actually flip the script. God first talked about building the vessels and then building the structure. We're actually going to do it the other way around. We're going to build the structure and then the vessels. And Moshe says, who are you to make that call? And Moshe says, what is more important? What's more important is the vessels, and the Aron HaKodesh being the most important of all vessels. And Mitzvah says, I don't disagree with you. But I see in executing, while the mind might first be on the first thing that's in your mind is the Aron HaKodesh, but in execution and what you actually bring into fruition, it will actually be the last thing that we will build. And we're going to first build the structure. And he explains. He says, if you build if you're building a house, do you first plop the furniture down? This is how the Talmud says it. Do you first put the furniture down and then build the house around it? Do you come to a work site and see the couches and the coffee table on the lamp sitting there in the middle of an empty field, and then the walls go up around it? No. First build the house, then you put in the stuff. And especially when it comes to something as holy as the Aron HaKodesh, which will house the Luchot. It says if that comes first, right? Where do you put it? You build the Aron HaKodesh, right? And you put in the Luchot. And now this is so holy that nobody's allowed to look at it or get near it, etc., etc. Where are you going to put it?
It's just going to stick out there in the
middle of the
weather.
Desert.
Yeah.
Right. In the 80-degree heat and then the next day snow. Right? So Bezalel's point is, while in sentimentality, the Aron comes first. But first you got to create the environment, and then you can bring in the Aron HaKodesh. Moshe and Bezalel debate, and what does Hashem tell Moshe to do? You shall build the Mishkan as in the way that Bezalel has deemed it to be so. That's what the verse means. The verse was that God was ruling on this matter and ruled that Bezalel was correct. So this detail is in the parsha. What's the lesson to us? So many lessons to be learned out of this seemingly just a practical, logistical debate. But it ultimately is a very, very powerful message and lesson. We've talked about already some version of this, actually about Shabbat. Which one did God say first, Zachor or Shamor? Trick question, he said them both at the same time. Right? Zachor v'Shamor, Shamor v'Zachor b'Dibor Echad, right? He said both of them. Zachor means you shall commemorate the day of Shabbos. You shall sanctify, make it holy and special by remembering it as such. Shamor means that you will protect the Shabbos, safeguard it by not doing all the things. So Zachor is the positive. Shamor is the protection by not violating the prohibitions. Zachor is Kiddush. Shamor is not lighting a fire, not going to work, etc. Now, the thing is, although God said them at the same time, one gets introduced to us before the other. Because the Luchot, the Aseret HaDibrot are twice in the Torah. Which one comes first? So in the first set of the Aseret HaDibrot, the first iteration of it, in the book of Shemot, how does it say it? Does it say Zachor or Shamor?
Shamor.
It says Zachor.
Shamor.
And then in Ve'etchanan, in Devarim, it says Shamor.
Gotcha. Right.
So Zachor first, and then Shamor.
Right.
Interesting, when Rav Shlomo Alkabetz wrote the Lechat Oti,
he did it backwards.
He flipped it.
Yeah.
He says Shamor v'Zachor b'Dibur Echad.
Right.
He does not say Zachor v'Shimor.
Right.
Now, if you're a little bit cynical, you say, why did he flip it? Because his name was Shlomo and not Zlomo.
That's funny.
he spelled out his name in the Lecha Dodi, and he needed the shin of Shamor to come first because he needed to begin that stanza with with that letter of his name. That's cynical. Now, we obviously Shalom Alkabetz as the great Kabbalist, etc., and the reason that the Chadodi is forever the prayer that we all recite to serenade the Shabbos is because there's an incredible depth to that. And I submit to you that the difference between the Torah's order and Shlomo Alkabetz's order is the same debate, or the same principles, rather, as Moshe and Bitzal. What comes first in sentiment? Zachor. That Shabbos is a holy day. Shabbos is not a day of knots. It's a day of. It's not a day of It's not a day of don't do's. It's a day of do's. It's not a day that you're off. It's a day that you're on. Shabbos is supposed to be a day full of something, full of substance, full of meaning. Not a day to rest and not do things. Zachor is what the spirit it drives and essential to the spirit of Shabbat. Zachor et Yom Shabbat l'kadsho. Make the kiddush. Spend time learning. Spend time davening. Spend time being holy. Shamor protects that. Shamor is ancillary to Zachor. Shamor means don't bring your weekday into Shabbat, so you've created the space that you're going to fill with holiness. Shamor is ancillary. So when the Torah is introducing it in the kind of the sentimentality, in the philosophical, in the theological, in the spirit of it, what comes first? Zachor before Shamor. Zachor is the primary. Shamor is the ancillary. In execution, however, when Shlomo Alkabetz is writing to us in the way we execute Shabbat, what do we execute first? The Shamor before the Zachor. Because you need to clear the space and make it a conducive environment so that you can then introduce the holiness of Shabbat, which is in fact what we do. The very first thing that comes in the second Shabbat is we first stop. Right? We stop working, we end the week, etc., etc. And then into that space we can bring the holiness of the Shabbat candles and the Kiddush and the davening and the learning, etc. But importantly, we have to understand that you can't, if the underlying message and lesson that we're trying to relay over here is if you want to tap into something, and you want a moment or a time or a entity infused, you need to make sure you've created the conducive environment for it. You need to make the space. This is what Bezalel understood. Moshe is living holiness. Wherever he goes is holy. For him, he doesn't, in a sense, comprehend what Bezalel understands as being one of us. You want the space to be able to hold the Aron HaKodesh. You can't just plop down the Aron HaKodesh and say, holy! You got to put up the barriers. You got to create the environment. You got to create the space. And then you can bring in the holiness. And in our own lives, sure, I should be able to connect to God wherever. Yeah, but you still go to Shul. Why? I don't need Shul. God's in Shul. God's everywhere. Yeah, God is everywhere, but can you feel God everywhere in the same way you can feel God in Shul? Sure. The hope is that after you experience God in Shul, you can then be better at having God in your bedroom and in your living room and in your place of work. But you first have to create the space. And if you want to ponder Torah, you can't do it in your pajamas. You got to sit up like a mensch, right? In class, right? In the yeshiva, our rebbes would not allow us to slouch when we were learning Torah. Why? Not even because academically we may not get it, but respect the space.
You know what this reminds me of? In my day, in the old day, they wouldn't when we took the bar exam, they made us get all dressed up, like in suits and in fancy clothes.
right? And then, again, say whatever we want. I'm not going politics one way or the other. Ronald Reagan would not walk into the Oval Office without a tie. Respecting the space. And so comes Bezalel and he teaches us something important. Before you can engage with holiness, you need to disengage from unholiness. Before you can properly, you have to, in a sense, do your due diligence. I've shared this a few times. I heard this and I thought it was an interesting nugget of information. I don't know if people here know who is considered the greatest football coach of all time. A fellow named Vince Lombardi, to the point where the great trophy that is awarded to the team that wins the Super Bowl is called the Lombardi Trophy. He coached in college for years and years and years, was the best coach in college history, and then he went on and coached the Green Bay Packers, the professional team in the NFL. But interesting, here's a tactic that Vince Lombardi would employ every year at the start of the training for the football season. He obviously would get the best recruits from all over the world to play for his college team because everybody wanted to play for Vince Lombardi. So these are the kids, the best football players, kids that have been groomed since they were in elementary school. Their talent for playing football was, in a sense, discovered, and then they were put into the best programs, and they were, in a sense, shepherded through the system. They would eat football, sleep football, hold the football in the hand, cuddle with the football at night. Everything was football, 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 football through elementary school and middle school and high school. If you want to say, we don't even have an appreciation for this. If you ever went to Texas and saw how seriously they take high school football, you would be bothered. I'm bothered, right? Because a high schooler should not feel the entire weight of a town on their shoulders, from the mayor to the police commissioner to everybody. You're a little kid going to high school, so you know how to throw a ball well. It does not mean you should feel the pressure, but this is the way it is. These are the kind of kids that arrive at Vince Lombardi's program, and they all come in on the first day of training, and Vince Lombardi holds up a football. He says, "You see this?" He says, "This is a football," and then he would toss it behind him and says, "You're not touching it for the next month and a half." And we're going back to basics, calisthenics, weight training, etc., etc. We're starting from the ground up. Don't think of touching a football for the next month and a half. These kids already came in, football. I know football like back of my hand. He says, no. You're in my system. In my system, before we touch a football, we become worthy of touching the football. By preparing ourselves as best as possible to now Vince Lombardi and that whole attitude is crazy because it's football. It's a game. Relax. Right? Having said that, if that could be true of something as mundane and as nourish as football.
Well, it's kind of the religion of the town, in a sense.
So then if that's true of this pseudo fake and foolish religion, how much more so it is when we're talking about the divine service of God. And how much as we say, God, it is only with your kindness, righteousness, and mercy that I'm even allowed into the space to pray to you. Now, of course, I don't want to make it seem, and that is what's interesting, that God demands this of us. We demand this of ourselves, but Bezalel comes to Moshe and says, it doesn't feel right. It does not feel right to interact with holiness without creating the correct space. Personally, the mindset, I have to lean in to my Yiddishkeit. You want to know why, in general, you'll not see rabbis in t-shirts and jeans? Is because they take themselves that seriously? No, but we take the responsibility to Yiddishkeit that seriously. And so it doesn't necessarily come down to a suit and a tie and a shirt. It comes back to a mental attitude. What is your attitude towards holiness? Do you assume that it is your entitlement and you take it for granted?
Rabbi,
One minute, let me just finish the point. Entitlement that you take for granted, or do you have the understanding that this is a tremendous gift that we don't really deserve to have the Aron HaKodesh in our midst? It is a gift from God, v'shachanti b'tocha, and we should always have that sense of humbleness and humility, and that sense of that as I approach with respect, I approach with gravitas. The fact that I get to pray to God 3 times a day should never cheapen that experience in my eyes. That I should always, whenever I pray, even if I am praying in my living room, but I should approach it as if I am entering into the holies. And that is such a powerful message that holiness deserves its space. Engaging in holiness deserves an environment conducive to it, whether it's actually a physical environment or whether it's a mental environment. But it deserves your respect. It deserves your attention. Never talk to God as an associative task while you're doing something else. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sandy. I see you wrote something. I'm sorry.
yeah, there's an active shooter at a Minnesota synagogue rammed a truck into the synagogue. It's ongoing right now. I think that's where my attention is now going to be. I'm sorry. Over.
No, anyways, we are wrapping up. As I said, we made the point, and I think this is the key message. Let's first, before we go, let's say together a chapter of Psalms for to hear only positive things. So we'll do this together. Please join in as we'll say this. Lamnat Seyach Mizmor LeDavid.
Lamatzek Mizmor LeDavid.
Yancha Adonai.
Yancha Adonai.
Adonai.
V'yom Tzara.
V'yom Sarah.
Yisagevcha.
Yisagevcha.
Shem Elohei.
Shem Elohei.
Yaakov.
Yaakov.
You know, I'm going to share it on the screen so we can say it a little quicker together. How everybody sees it. We're holding verse 3. Yishlach Ezrecha Mikodesh Umitzion Yisadecha Yizkor Minchotecha Ve'olatcha
Yidashna Sela
Yitain Lecha Milvavecha
Yitain Lecha Milvavecha
V'chol Atzatcha Yimalei
Yimalei
Niranena Bishuatecha
Is Bishuatecha.
Oveshem Eloheinu Nidgol
Ushem Eloheinu Gol
Yimalei Adonai
Yimalei Adonai
Kol Mishalotecha
Kol Mishalotecha.
Ata Yadati
Yadati
Ki Hoshia Adonai
Ki Hoshia Adonai
Mishicho Yanehu
Yanehu
Mishmei
Mishmei
Kacho
Kosho
Mishmei Chosho Yikorot
Yashai Yamino
Yashai Yamino
Ela Varechev
Ela
V'recha
V'racha
Ve'ela Vasusim
Ve'ela Basusim
V'anachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Naskir
V'nakbez B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nasachir
Hema Karu
Hemakaru
V'nafalu
V'nafalu
V'anachnu Kamnu
V'nachnu Kamu
V'nito Dad
V'nitodah
Adonai Hoshia
Hoshia HaMelech Yaneinu
Melech Yaneinu
Hamelech Yaneinu B'Yom Chareinu
V'Yom Kareinu. All right, we should hear good news, everybody. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Sure.